I needed to recover. I was not in a good place. Football was bringing me down, and I didn't like it. And I was losing that joy in life.
Those are the words of Rob Gronkowski. Across 11 seasons, he took 9 surgeries and around 20 concussions, then retired, returned, and retired again. His fate was decided not on the scoreboard, but inside his own body and brain. This is the tragic fate of Rob Gronkowski. A body built for war. To tell the fate of Rob Gronkowski, you have to start with the injuries because the injuries are the story. They began before he ever played a down in the NFL. In 2009, while he was still in college at Arizona, a herniated disc with nerve impingement forced him to miss his entire junior season for back surgery. He came back, but the pattern was already set. The Patriots drafted him anyway, and for a while, the body held. Then came 2012. On an extra point block, Gronkowski shattered his left forearm. The break led to infections. The infections led to more procedures. He missed games. He played through pain. The forearm by itself required multiple surgeries. Then came 2013, and a single play that did the kind of damage most players never recover from. Against Cleveland, Gronkowski took a hit that produced a concussion, a torn ACL, and a torn MCL at the same time. One play, 3 injuries. He missed most of the season. And that same year, he was already dealing with a fractured vertebra and a herniated disc, part of a back saga that would eventually require 3 separate procedures. The forearm was not a one-time event either. The same arm was rebroken, the infection returned, and the surgeries piled up on top of each other. He played in a Super Bowl with that arm still healing. He blocked it, he caught it, and then he went back under the knife again. The back was its own long chapter. The herniated disc in college, the fractured vertebra, the repeated procedures. In total, Gronkowski underwent 3 separate back operations across his career. 3 on the part of the body that has to absorb every block, every tackle, and every landing. Add it up, and the list keeps going. High ankle sprains, quad contusions, hamstrings, groin. In 2021, a punctured lung and fractured ribs. Every season seemed to take a new piece of him. Fans learned to hold their breath on every catch over the middle because the next hit could be the one that ended it. Each of those injuries carried its own consequences off the field, too. Everyone sparked trade rumors, everyone fueled retirement talk. Everyone started debates about whether the Patriots were overusing him. The injuries weren't just physical events. They were the running headlines of his entire career. The number that captures it best comes from Gronkowski himself.
I mean, I went through it. I had 9 surgeries. Probably had like 20 concussions in my life.
9 surgeries, 20 concussions. That is not a career. That is a casualty list. And the worst of it did not come in a loss. It came after the biggest win of his life. After Super Bowl Lee, Gronkowski was a champion again. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he was alone in a bed, unable to move and unable to sleep, paying the price for the title in real time.
I could barely walk. I slept for 5 minutes that night. I was in tears in my bed after a Super Bowl victory.
Tears in bed after a Super Bowl win. That single image tells you everything about the bargain Gronkowski made. He gave the league a player who absorbed punishment that would have sidelined most men permanently. A human wrecking ball who took hits piece by piece and kept coming back for more. And here's the part that makes it a tragedy and not just a highlight reel. The injuries were never separate events. They stacked, each one built on the last. A back that had already been operated on. A forearm that had already been rebuilt. A knee that had already been reconstructed. A brain that had already been rattled 20 times over. By the time he reached his late 20s, the body that made him the most dominant tight end in football was the same body telling him it could not go on. That is the cost of the legend. Every seam route, every contested catch, every block on special teams added another withdrawal from an account that was running dry. The very thing that made him great, that he would run into anyone, anywhere, at full speed, was the thing breaking him down. His career, in the simplest terms, was triumph built directly on top of destruction. The forearm in 2012, the knee in 2013, the back across 3 different years, the lung and ribs in 2021. The concussions nobody counted until he counted them himself. And at the center of it all, that night after Super Bowl Lee, crying in bed, barely able to walk, after winning the highest prize in the sport, a man can survive a broken bone. He can survive a torn ligament. The question that defines the rest of this story is what happens when the body is not the only thing that breaks, because the hits did more than damage muscle and tissue. They reach the mind. In order to understand why a champion at the top of the sport decided to walk away from it all, we need to take a look at the toll that football was taking on him off the field. The weight he couldn't carry. The injury list is brutal on paper, but numbers on a page can't capture the suffocating darkness that settled over Rob Gronkowski in the spring of 2019. The physical wreckage was visible: the limp, the surgeries, the swollen joints. What no one could see was the slow, grinding erosion of the one thing that had always defined him: his joy. Gronkowski had always been the embodiment of fun, the larger-than-life party animal, the giant who spiked footballs like he was trying to bury them in the earth and laughed his way through every press conference. And that's exactly what made the emotional collapse so haunting. The most joyful man in football had had run completely out of joy. After that hollow, agonizing aftermath of Super Bowl lead, something fundamental had shifted inside him. He was 29 years old, an age when most stars are entering their prime, and yet his body felt ancient and betrayed. The sleepless nights weren't an occasional inconvenience. They were a relentless nightly torment. He turned down the prospect of yet another surgery, exhausted by the endless cycle of breaking and rebuilding. And in his own raw, unfiltered words, he admitted football was actively dragging him into a dark place. This is the heartbreaking core of his first retirement. It wasn't a contract dispute. It wasn't a chase for more money. It was a desperate act of self-preservation by a man who had given his body to the sport and was watching the sport take his spirit in return. The game he loved had quietly become the thing that was destroying him from the inside out. And he knew that if he didn't escape, there might not be much left of the person underneath the pads. The decision crystallized in a moment of painful clarity. Gronkowski understood that healing, real healing, the kind that mattered, required a clean and complete break.
So that's what I knew too. And I knew I had to step away from the game of football in order to accomplish that, let my body heal, let my mind heal.
Let my body heal, let my mind heal. Notice that he said both. The body was obvious. Anyone who watched him hobble off the field after Super Bowl lead could see that. But the mind was the quieter, more terrifying wound, the one that doesn't show up on an MRI or an injury report. For a man whose entire public identity was built on being indestructible and endlessly cheerful, admitting that his mind needed to heal was a stunning, vulnerable confession. So in March 2019, at just 29, Rob Gronkowski walked away. It felt like the abrupt, premature end of an era. Fans were stunned, but the reaction was overwhelmingly tender and supportive. Many of them had spent years cringing at every brutal hit, and a great number saw his exit not as quitting, but as a wise and necessary act of survival. They wanted the man to outlast the player. And here's the beautiful, redemptive part of this chapter. Stepping away worked. Freed from the weekly cycle of collisions, Gronkowski began to rebuild himself. He embraced CBD to manage the relentless pain. He worked out on his own terms. He partied, and slowly, gloriously, he rediscovered the joy that football had stolen from him. The light came back on. The man who had been crying in bed after a championship was, for the first time in years, genuinely happy. It should have been the perfect ending. The tragic hero escapes the machine that was crushing him, reclaims his life, and rides off into a sunset of fun and freedom. The story could have stopped right there, and it would have been a clean, hopeful resolution to a punishing career. He was free. The pain was finally manageable. The smile was back. For the first time in a long time, Rob Gronkowski got to simply be a person rather than a battered athlete on a countdown clock, and the public adored him for it. There was no bitterness in his exit, no burning of bridges, no ugly contract feud trailing behind him. He left on a note of gratitude and self-awareness, and fans rewarded that honesty with an outpouring of respect. In an era where so many athletes are pushed until there's nothing left, here was a champion who had the courage to say enough while he still had a life worth protecting. But fate and football are rarely that simple, because while Gronkowski was off enjoying his hard-won peace, a phone call was coming, one that would test whether a man can truly walk away from the only thing he was ever built to do. The pull of the game wasn't finished with him yet, and neither was the most important relationship of his career. In order to understand why a man who had finally found peace would willingly march back into the very war that broke him, we need to take a look at the magnetic force that pulled him out of retirement. The pull of the brotherhood. Retirement had given Rob Gronkowski his life back. It would take the most relentless competitor in football history to pull him out of it. And in 2020, that's exactly what happened when Tom Brady left New England and signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brady wasn't just Gronkowski's old quarterback. He was his closer, his co-conspirator, the architect of nearly every glorious moment of his career. And Brady, ever the relentless winner, wasn't about to start over in Tampa without the weapon he trusted most. So he came calling, and he didn't stop calling. The recruitment was dogged, personal, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't a front office making an offer. This was a friend asking his brother to ride into battle one more time. For a man who had walked away to save his body and his sanity, the temptation was enormous and deeply human. This is the pull of unfinished business, of loyalty, of brotherhood, the irresistible chance to chase glory one more time alongside the one person who had been there for all of it. Gronkowski had found peace, yes, but peace can feel a lot like an empty stadium when the man you won championships with is asking you to come home. So Gronkowski answered the call, and he didn't do it halfway. He attacked his comeback with a ferocity that bordered on obsession, training in an intense Navy SEAL-style lifestyle regimen, dropping weight, and reshaping the very body he had stepped away to protect. The Patriots traded his rights to the Buccaneers, and just like that, the dynamic duo was reunited under the Florida sun. The party animal had become a man on a mission. The Hollywood script practically wrote itself. In their very first season together in Tampa, Brady and Gronkowski marched all the way to Super Bowl LV and won it. Gronkowski hauled in 2 touchdowns in the championship game, a storybook performance that felt like cosmic justice for everything he'd endured. But this is where the triumph reveals its dark, familiar underside. Because Gronkowski didn't catch those 2 touchdowns as a healthy, restored athlete. He caught them while hiding broken ribs. Read that again. The man who retired because his body was screaming at him, who cried in bed after a Super Bowl win, was now concealing fractured ribs just to stay on the field and chase another ring. The comeback had instantly reignited the exact cycle of pain and concealment that had driven him away in the first place. This is the cruel, beautiful paradox at the heart of Gronkowski's fate. The brotherhood that gave him a second act of pure Hollywood magic was the same force pulling him straight back into the meat grinder. He called it a chance to live like a champion again, and for a glorious season he did. But champions in football pay in flesh, and Gronkowski's account was already overdrawn. The body kept sending the bill. The broken ribs were just the start. There were back spasms. There was, in 2021, a punctured lung and more fractured ribs, a terrifying echo of the very damage he'd tried to escape. The piece he'd fought so hard to find in retirement was being chipped away, hit by hit, all over again. The temptation of one more run had a steep, predictable price. There were near misses and twists hiding in the background of his career, too. Stories that later emerged about Gronkowski considering retirement at one point to avoid being traded away to the Detroit Lions. His loyalty had always been to New England, to Brady, to the brotherhood, not to just any uniform. The bonds were the whole point. They were what made him come back, and they were what dictated where and how he was willing to play. Finally, in 2022, the body won the argument for good. Gronkowski retired again, and this time he made it clear he had no plans to return. 2 championships in Tampa, a second Super Bowl ring with his brother, and a body that had now been broken, rebuilt, and broken again across 2 different franchises and 11 punishing seasons. But here's the darkest question this whole saga raises, the one that no surgery can answer and no retirement can resolve. We've talked about the bones, the ligaments, the lungs, the ribs. We've talked about the joy that drained away and the brotherhood that pulled him back. But there's one organ we haven't fully reckoned with, and it's the one that matters most. 20 concussions, 5 blackouts, a head that he himself described as feeling different. In order to understand the most chilling and uncertain chapter of Rob Gronkowski's fate, we need to take a look at what all those hits may have done to his brain. The shadow over his mind. This is the darkest, most suspenseful chapter of the entire saga, and the one with no clean ending in sight. Because while broken ribs heal and reconstructed knees can be rebuilt, the human brain offers no such mercy. And Rob Gronkowski's brain absorbed a staggering amount of trauma. The numbers came from his own mouth, in interviews where he was startlingly candid about the toll. He acknowledged sustaining roughly 20 concussions over his life, including 5 blackout ones where he lost consciousness. 5 times, the lights went out completely, and he described sensations that should chill anyone who hears them. A head that feels thicker, with a strange fluid quality, along with mood swings, fog, and unnerving feelings after big hits. He laid it out plainly when he summarized the wreckage of his career.
I mean, I went through it. I had 9 surgeries. Probably had like 20 concussions in my life.
20 concussions, spoken almost casually, the way someone might list off a grocery run. But behind that number sits the specter that haunts every former NFL player. CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the progressive, degenerative brain disease linked to exactly the kind of repeated head trauma Gronkowski endured for over a decade. And this is where Gronkowski's story took an explosive, controversial turn that split the public down the middle. In 2019, around the time of his first retirement, Gronkowski claimed that he had fixed his CTE, that through lifestyle changes, specific exercises, CBD, and dedicated recovery, he had repaired the damage to his brain. The backlash was immediate and fierce, and it came from the people who understand this disease better than anyone on the planet. The fundamental, scientifically established problem with his claim is devastatingly simple. CTE is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that can currently only be diagnosed after death. You cannot fix it the way you'd ice a sprained ankle. Chris Nowinski of the Concussion Legacy Foundation and other leading experts pushed back hard, warning that the message wasn't just wrong, it was dangerously misleading, especially for young players who might hear a beloved star say brain damage is reversible and decide the risk is worth it. The experts at Boston University's CTE Center, the very institution at the forefront of this research, had a different read on his situation entirely. To them, the meaningful, hopeful development wasn't some imaginary cure. It was the retirement itself. Dr. Ann McKee, the renowned BU researcher, framed his initial retirement as a relief, precisely because stepping away from the game was the single most most effective thing he could do to limit further damage to his brain. In other words, the brain can't be repaired, but you can stop hurting it, and walking away in their eyes was the genuinely smart and protective move. So the drama and the mystery deepened. Was Gronkowski in denial, clinging to a comforting fiction to protect his legacy and to feel okay about encouraging the next generation to play? Or had he genuinely found a measure of relief, real, felt improvement in his daily life that science simply hasn't caught up to or fully explained yet? He later softened his stance somewhat, but he stood by the fact that he felt better, that the fog had lifted, that he was functioning. The public split right down the middle. Some praised his openness and vulnerability, his willingness to talk about concussions and mental fog at a time when many players hid such things in shame. Others saw a famous athlete spreading a hopeful but unproven narrative that could lead impressionable kids straight into harm's way. Both readings have weight. Both can feel true at the same time. And that ambiguity is exactly what makes this chapter so haunting. Because here's the unbearable suspense at the center of it all. Nobody knows how this ends. CTE is progressive, which means symptoms can emerge or worsen years, even decades, after the hits stop coming. The damage is invisible right now. Gronkowski appears sharp, energetic, and engaged in his public life. But the disease, if it's there, plays a long and patient game. The tragic weight of countless other former players, men who seemed fine and then weren't, hangs over his every public appearance. So the question lingers, unanswered and unanswerable for now. Will the symptoms return? Will the fog roll back in? Is the relief he describes a genuine reprieve, or merely the quiet calm before a storm that science can't yet predict? This is the shadow that no amount of CBD, exercise, or positive thinking can fully banish. It is the one injury from his career that has no surgery, no rehab, and no certain prognosis. And yet, remarkably, the story Gronkowski is living today is not one of darkness. Against the grim backdrop of everything we've covered, his actual present-day life is full of light, success, and one genuinely tear-jerking act of love and loyalty. In order to understand the surprising and bittersweet final chapter of Rob Gronkowski's fate, we need to take a look at the man he has become after football and the dying wish that brought him home. Redemption and the final goodbye. After everything, the 9 surgeries, the 20 concussions, the joy that drained away and came roaring back, the brotherhood, the controversy, and the shadow hanging over his brain, you might expect the final chapter of Rob Gronkowski's story to be a sad one. It isn't. As of 2026, Gronkowski is, by every outward measure, thriving. There is no dramatic downfall here, no cautionary tale collapse. Instead, he reinvented himself with the same energy he once brought to the field. He became a Fox NFL Sunday analyst, bringing his unmistakable personality to millions of living rooms every weekend. He co-hosts massive events, runs his Gronk fitness business empire, records podcasts alongside his old teammate Julian Edelman, and throws his signature Gronk Beach parties. The endorsements keep flowing. The party animal grew up without ever losing his spark, and on the surface he appears sharp and full of life, a living rebuttal, at least for now, to the darkest fears about his health. His personal life mirrors that stability. His long-term relationship with Camille Kostek, whom he met when she was a Patriots cheerleader around 2015, has remained steady and largely private through all the chaos of his career. No public drama, just a constant presence beside him. But the most emotional, unexpected twist of his entire post-football life came in November of 2025, and it had nothing to do with money, fame, or fun. It had everything to do with loyalty and with honoring the dying wish of a friend. Her name was Susan Hurley, a former Patriots cheerleader and a beloved philanthropist. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. As her illness advanced, she made a request that would set this whole beautiful moment in motion. Robert Kraft, the Patriots owner, explained the heart of it.
A young lady by the name of Susan Hurley, a beloved friend of Rob's and our organization.
Kraft described her not as a stranger or a casual acquaintance, but as someone woven into the fabric of the entire organization, a friend to him, to Gronkowski, and to the whole Patriots family.
She was a former Patriots cheerleader, and she had cancer, unfortunately, and was very ill with it.
A former cheerleader, gravely ill, and in her final stretch surrounded by the people and the cause she loved, she made a request that revealed exactly where her heart was.
And one of her last requests, right at the ceremony donating this playground, she asked that
it happened at a ceremony to donate a playground, a moment of giving back, of building something for children. And in the middle of that act of generosity, she voiced her wish.
She said she wanted Rob to retire as a Patriot.
She wanted Rob to retire as a Patriot, that was it. A dying woman's wish was not for herself, but for the legacy of a friend, that the man who had given New England so many of its greatest moments should officially close his career in the uniform where it began. Robert Kraft made it happen. He moved up the timeline, and the Patriots signed Gronkowski Gronkowski to a one-day contract at Gillette Stadium so he could officially retire as a New England Patriot. It was a tearful, heartfelt ceremony, fulfilling the last wish of a friend who didn't live to see another season. The event also tied directly into Gronkowski's own philanthropy, the Gronk Playground Project, born from that same spirit of giving back. For Gronkowski himself, the meaning of it all came pouring out. His desire to give to the community, and the very origin of the playground traced straight back to Hurley.
I wanted to give back to the community, and that's when that idea to open the playground came about, with Susan Hurley right there.
The playground, the community, her presence in the memory of it. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a contractual formality. It was the closing of a circle, a man honoring the person who helped inspire his best instincts off the field. And when it came to putting on that Patriots uniform one final time, there was no hesitation, no second thoughts, no debate.
It was an absolute no-brainer to come here and retire as a Patriot.
A no-brainer. After everything his career had cost him, coming home was the easiest decision he ever made, and the recognition didn't stop there. The fans voted him into the Patriots Hall of Fame, cementing his place among the franchise's all-time greats as part of the 2026 induction class. So where does that leave the tragic fate of Rob Gronkowski? It leaves him in a strange and powerful place. A man whose body was broken piece by piece, whose mind carries an invisible question mark, and yet whose life today overflows with success, love, and meaning. He still jokes about comebacks. He still manages his pain with fitness and CBD. He still lights up every room he walks into. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen.